les voit en arriver un usage de la force pour déloger les manifestants?
Moi, ma priorité, c'est d'en finir avec ces blocages, ces barricades. On pense à tous ces Canadiens qui sont impactés par la crise économique que c'est en train de créer, des jobs perdus, des manufacturiers fermés. Ça ne peut plus continuer. Je continue de travailler très proche avec des leaders municipaux. J'ai parlé longuement avec le premier ministre Ford hier soir. On va continuer de travailler ensemble pour s'assurer une fin à ces barricades.
How will you do it, though? How will the border crossings actually be cleared and opened again?
First and foremost, we have to understand that these barricades are unacceptable. They are impacting on regular Canadians, whether it's grocery store prices, whether it's jobs lost and suspended, whether it's supply chains disrupted. This is hurting communities across the country. That's why I've been working closely with municipal leaders, with all of our partners. I had a long conversation with Premier Ford last night. We're going to continue to do what's necessary to end these barricades.
So what's the plan? So, Minister, how are you going to end these protests at the borders in particular?
Well, first, I just want to again say that these illegal blockades are not helping Canadians, they're hurting Canadians. I'm thinking, for example, about the auto worker that can't go to work today because of the blockade at Ambassador Bridge. And that's why, since day one, the government has been taking very concrete action to ensure law enforcement has all of the resources that they need. I'm pleased to advise that the RCMP are going to be sending additional reinforcements to Ottawa. I can also advise that the RCMP will be sending reinforcements to Windsor. And in addition to that, the RCMP have added additional resources in Coutts in Alberta.
C'est quoi votre seuil pour en arriver à l'usage de la force pour déloger les manifestants? Combien de temps ça peut durer avant qu'on utilise la force?
Mais vous avez des raisons, et ça c'est la raison que je sais que tout le monde comprend que c'est une situation qui est grave pour les Canadiens, qui ont besoin d'aller au travail, de faire le travail. Et on va continuer de travailler ensemble avec les provinces, avec les municipalités pour assurer que tous les réseaux sont là pour les services de police.
How many officers are going to Windsor, to Ottawa,
Yeah, no, I
to
understand.
Coutts, to Manitoba?
I totally appreciate that question, but for obvious reasons, particularly around operational sensitivity, we won't get into the numbers.
So what do you say to voters and Canadians who are not hearing a plan from police, they're not hearing a plan from your government, they're not hearing a plan from provincial governments, and it appears that this is just expected to continue indefinitely?
Well, just to be clear, the plan is to make sure that all of the police have the resources that they need, and I've given you some very concrete and tangible examples of how we at the federal level of government are providing additional reinforcements to Ottawa, to Windsor, to Coutts, and making sure that law enforcement have all of the resources that they need to do the job.
To do what? What's their job?
To uphold the law and to make sure that we get these illegal blockades ended. And that is our top priority. Our top priority is to make sure that these illegal blockades end, and I was encouraged to see that the interim leader of the opposition has finally come around and has called for the illegal blockades to end, is to make sure that we can get trade and travel going again, and that is going to be our unwavering focus.
Quand allez-vous intervenir et combien d'agents de plus allez-vous envoyer? Et quand on peut s'attendre à ce que ces agents-là arrivent? Combien de temps vous allez laisser ça durer?
Écoute, nous avons depuis le début pris des actions concrètes, par exemple d'ajouter des ressources supplémentaires de la GRC pour Ottawa, pour Windsor, pour Coutts, et on va continuer d'ajouter les ressources comment ils en ont besoin.
The Ambassador Bridge costs Canadians being closed $400 million a day. Can you not be more specific about when it might be open, when these reinforcements will arrive, when Canadians can get back to their lives, when those auto plants can reopen?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I'm very familiar with the community in Windsor, and I think our heart goes out to every single worker who can't get to their job because of these illegal blockades. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really pleased to see that the RCMP have taken decisive action to add reinforcements to the Windsor Police Service. But we also got to be sure that the province is there. I've continued to remain very much in contact with our provincial counterparts, not only in Ontario, but in Alberta and elsewhere. And I think everybody understands that there is a real urgency to end the illegal blockade as quickly as possible.
The Ford government is not attending your meeting today.
He said one more.
The
I'll
Ford
take one
government
more.
is not attending your trilateral meeting again today. How can you say that you're getting cooperation with the province when they won't even sit down with you?
Well, because I'm continuing to remain in contact with our provincial counterpart, and not only in Ontario, but elsewhere.
Well,
I've spoken with Minister Maroney yesterday. I know the Prime Minister has spoken with the Premier. Our colleagues are talking. We have been pressing the point that the Ambassador Bridge is incredibly important for Canada's economy and Canadian jobs. So we're, we're offering any type of assistance that the provincial government needs.
But nothing's happening. Ontario is not participating in the trilateral table today. Nothing's happening. Washington is getting impatient. But what can you do to force something to happen?
We will do anything that we can to ensure that the law is upheld. We continue to speak with our provincial counterparts to ensure that the blockades is open.
When will you do that?
What are your thoughts on the convoy?
What are my thoughts on the convoy?
Yeah, is it time to go or what?
It was time to go 2 weeks ago.
And so I saw you walking across the street. Like, how do you feel when you're in the city?
Well, I don't feel particularly threatened, but on the other hand, I'm 6'2" and 185 pounds. I know a lot of my colleagues do feel threatened, and some of them have made the decision that they won't come to Parliament Hill. I think that is quite regrettable.
But now you have the mayor talking about mediation. There's a lot of pressure to talk to these folks. What's holding you back?
I don't know how you talk to people who have spread lawlessness from one end of the country to the other and are impacting not only the lives of the people in the parliamentary precinct, but the people of Canada. You know, when the Ambassador Bridge is closed, you talk about supply chains, you ain't seen nothing yet. You will see literally grocery shelves going empty because of these so-called freedom people. This isn't freedom. This is lawlessness.
And what do you think Indigenous protests were cracked down 2 years ago, when in Belleville, when they were supporting the Wet'suwet'en?
Yeah.
And now we're watching this going on feet from the center of democracy. Why are Indigenous people treated differently?
Well, that's probably a 150-year-old question and a legitimate question. I would add to that question other people who are making legitimate protests. But certainly here on Parliament Hill, I've never seen anything like it. This is flat-out lawlessness, and it needs to end. And I would encourage, if mediation will do it, I'm all in favor.
What did you think of Ms. Bergen's comments today?
Yeah. Well, I thought about 2 weeks too late. You know, you can't go out and take selfies with the protesters and say what great people they are, and all they are is, you know, women with baby carriages and children and things like that. And then 2 weeks later, after they don't go home, then you say, oh, well, it's time to go home, boys and girls. Party's over. And meanwhile, the whole thing has gone way out of control. You know, she is directly, and her caucus are directly responsible for the blockades in Alberta and for the blockades at Ambassador Bridge and everything else. You can't just walk away from it. And what has happened out of all of this is that this encourages lawlessness. So whether it's a counter of some kind or another, or whether it's some other protest, I don't really know.
What do you think about their thoughts, though, when they're talking about the Wet'suwet'en, when they're blocking the railroads, and now their take here, and they're not really saying much? What does that tell you?
Well, enough hypocrisy to go around for everybody.
But isn't it a time for your government to present a detailed plan about how you're going to basically slowly remove, some measures? Isn't it?
This is an ongoing daily conversation between the various levels of government and the health authorities. I am not prepared to substitute my judgment for that of Dr. Tam or Dr. Moore or Dr. Cairns. It is risk management, and this is what it's all about. And if the hospitalizations are going down, that obviously reduces the risk. If the deaths are going down, that obviously reduces the risk. But until that has definitively been made by the authorities that know a heck of a lot more about it than you and I, this stays in place, as do the social distancing rules. So I think the whole thing, the Conservative motion, is nonsense.
Is it time for the Prime Minister or someone to take the lead on this thing and to sort of
well, he has been taking the lead. I mean, he's got us for the last 2.5 years of this horror show.
I mean, the protests.
Well, he has to defer to the appropriate authorities, and how long that deference takes place, I don't know. We've got 3 police services here. We got the Parliamentary Protective Police Service, we've got the Ottawa Police Service, we've got the Ontario Police Service. Surely to goodness, those are enough police services to gain control over this lawless situation. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
I feel disappointed. I mean, we're doing our best as Canadians to look out for each other, to make sure that we're keeping each other safe, to putting people's lives above, above dollars and above anything else. And it's unfortunate that some Canadians, don't feel that that's the case.
So what about Joel Lightbound? I mean, do you have sympathy for him? Can you level with him at all?
I've had good conversations with Joel, but we definitely disagree on what his thoughts were.
How do you feel about? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
I am.
Okay. Sorry. How do you feel about the Conservatives' change of tone on the protest, that they are now inviting them to leave?
Well, I've been in the House of Commons for 2 emergency debates on protests. One was 2 years ago when Indigenous people were protesting, and now seeing what we're seeing here. There's definitely a difference in tone and empathy that they have for this group than was expressed 2 years ago during the protests with Indigenous communities. And that's deeply troubling to me, but not at all surprising for what I've seen from the Conservatives during my time as a Member of Parliament.
Do you think it's too late to, on day 14, now invite them to leave?
I don't think that it's ever too late for any kind of communication, but I think that it's been clear that they're not welcome here by all parties, but they still are.
You believe racism is a part of policing? When you look at what happened in Belleville and when you look at what's happening here, do you believe systemic racism, plays a role?
I believe that systemic racism is in all parts of Canada, and we're working to do more about that. I've had some really good conversations with Minister Lametti as recent as last night about what we can do to further that. So if you're asking me if there's systemic racism within the justice system, I'd say yes. I'd say they're coming from a riding that represented Donald Marshall Jr.
Is this an example of it then?
I don't know. I don't know
the fact they're still here after, 13, 14 days?
I'd hate to get to that conclusion and to say that, but I can definitely say that there's a difference in tone between what we saw when Indigenous people were protesting peacefully than what we're seeing here today. And, I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You're just talking with the truckers. Do you have some... What did you have a conversation about?
I didn't have a conversation.
Do you support them?
You just asked me, where's Trudeau? I say, I don't know.
But do you support them?
No. We asked today, we asked them to leave, to please leave the city. We understood and we support the recommendation about a restriction, but actually it's enough. And we asked this today.
Thank you. Are you happy to see this still going on?
For the truckers to go home, as Ms. Bergen has said?
I'm excited that the truckers have made an impact, and I'm looking forward to see what other Liberal MPs step out, and I think they're having an impact. So,
but do you think it's time for them to go? Because your leader is now saying it's time for them to go.
Yeah, the blockades at the border, I think they should open up and make sure that traffic can flow.
What about here? What about here? What about this one?
They're pulling.
It's time for restrictions to end.
Why are you so quick to condemn Indigenous blockades?
Do you agree it's time for the truckers to leave?
Thank you very much.
As Ms. Bergen has said?
Well, you know what? I think the truckers being here have served some purpose, but that purpose may be over. When we look at our economy across Canada, whether it's beef producers in southern Alberta or auto plants here in Ontario, they're starting to feel the impacts of the blockades, and that's having a problem. So, we promised them to fight the mandates, to open up the border, and we're committed to do that, and we'll continue to do that whether they're here or not.
So you agree with her, I think, right?
Yes, I do.
Je pense que le gouvernement doit prendre le leadership de la situation en ce moment. C'est plus seulement un problème qui touche la colline parlementaire. On le voit, c'est ciblé à travers le Canada. Donc, je n'irai pas jusqu'à dire que c'est une attaque envers le Canada, mais certainement que le fédéral est interpellé puis doit agir en chef d'État. On n'a pas vu M. Trudeau beaucoup aborder la question ou seulement rouspéter lui-même ou dire aux manifestants d'aller se faire vacciner, mais c'est rendu bien plus grand que ça. Puis je pense que la situation montre qu'on a besoin d'agir.
Donc ça veut dire quoi, employer la force?
Non, pas employer la force parce que les manifestants eux-mêmes n'ont pas employé la force. Ça, je pense que c'est important de le mentionner. La ville d'Ottawa réclame plus d'agents de sécurité. Ils en réclament 1800. Ottawa, on a envoyé 15% de la demande. Pourquoi pas répondre à la demande complètement puis envoyer plus d'agents?
Mais sur le pont, par exemple, comment est-ce qu'on sort ces camionneurs qui sont là?
C'est une bonne question. Mais je pense que tout le monde a besoin de travailler ensemble. Je vois M. Ford qui ne peut pas participer à la table trilatérale. Est-ce que parce qu'il ne se passe rien et le fédéral ne prend pas le leadership? La question se pose, mais je pense que ça commence à faire beaucoup de manifestations et de sièges à travers le Canada. Donc, directement, le premier ministre est interpellé et a besoin d'agir.
Et dernière question, est-ce que ça peut avoir un impact négatif, vous pensez, sur notre relation avec les Américains, le fait que, comme une grande artère commerciale est bloquée et que ça a commencé au Canada, cette situation-là, ça fait plusieurs semaines que ça dure?
Mais justement, je pense que ça l'a influencé. Le mouvement canadien a peut-être influencé un mouvement américain à son tour et on voyait justement au Comité de la sécurité publique des fonds qui provenaient de l'étranger, qui provenaient de personnalités américaines. Alors, à partir du moment où ça a été une inspiration canadienne, oui, ça peut créer des problèmes. Donc, on invite M. Trudeau à parler à ses homologues pour s'assurer que la situation ne s'envenime pas.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du changement de ton voulez-vous reprendre votre souffle? J'ai un peu d'empathie, là, ça va?
Oui, je ne vais pas perdre connaissance.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du changement de ton de Candice Bergen qui dit maintenant qu'effectivement, ils doivent partir, mais au jour 14 de tout ça?
Je pense qu'il est pas trop peu, trop tard. Je pense que tous les élus doivent se rassembler puis dire, il est le temps, là. Après 14 jours, il faut s'en aller. Mais je pense que ça démontre que c'était peut-être un petit jeu politique au départ de dire que ça pouvait peut-être les servir parce qu'on se rend compte que des manifestants, c'est peut-être la base du Parti conservateur. Alors, on voulait les faire plaisir, mais maintenant, on change notre fusil d'épaule parce qu'on voit que ça dégénère. Alors, bien sûr, j'invite tous les élus là, à rappeler à la solidarité, à l'unité.
Concrètement, je pense qu'il y a eu une belle proposition quand même des conservateurs de réunir tous les chefs de parti pour discuter d'une solution de sortie de crise. Maintenant, c'est une situation qui est hyper polarisée. La meilleure façon de la dépolariser, c'est peut-être d'unir tous les chefs de parti. Et François a indiqué qu'il serait prêt à participer à ça. Je pense que c'est une chose intéressante qui est sur la table.
Qu'est-ce que le gouvernement Trudeau devrait faire en lien avec la situation au pont ambassadeur en ce moment? Est-ce qu'il faut utiliser la force? Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire?
Je pense que c'est tellement crucial dans les échanges commerciaux qu'on a avec les États-Unis, puis il y a tellement d'entreprises qui comptent là-dessus, tellement d'emplois qui sont reliés, qu'il va falloir que le gouvernement libéral agisse. Ils ont tendance à se traîner les pieds ici, mais je pense que si la municipalité a besoin de l'appui de la GRC, je pense qu'on devrait répondre présent pour être capable de disperser ces manifestants-là qui font un tort vraiment très, très grave à l'Ontario, mais à l'ensemble de l'économie canadienne.
Jusqu'à présent, ils n'ont jamais refusé de mandat de la GRC. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'ils peuvent faire de plus?
Peut-être qu'on pourra voir si éventuellement ça devient vraiment un enjeu d'intérêt national, où là, ils pourraient prendre une initiative en tant que gouvernement fédéral.
Genre?
Il faut être capable de disperser.
La loi sur les mesures d'urgence, quelque chose qui...
Il faudrait évaluer ces possibilités-là, mais je pense que l'impact est tellement majeur que le gouvernement libéral devrait évaluer toutes les possibilités pour l'instant pour être capable de sauvegarder notre économie, nos PME puis nos emplois.
Est-ce que vous vous inquiétez?
La situation serait différente en ce moment si les manifestants ici étaient autochtones ou s'ils étaient racistes?
Oui, la situation aurait été très différente. Je pense pas que ça se serait rendu même au centre-ville.
Well, I made that clear in my remarks.
Yeah, but I mean, you're watching it right now. How do you feel about this walking into it? You must have some thoughts. I mean, we're here, like, there's 100 trucks here, so...
Yeah, well, I think the blockades need to come down.
Yeah.
And I think that both here and at the border. And
but I mean, it's costing Canada millions and
Agreed.
millions. And you know what? 2 years ago, the Wet'suwet'en protest, there was people in Belleville. There was calls to shut that down, and it was shut down within a week.
That's right.
So why is this going on so long?
Well, there's no right to blockade. There's no right to blockade.
Why do Indigenous blockades get shut down so quickly, and this one goes on?
Well, that's a question for law enforcement.
Well, I think it's a question for government.
Well, it's a question for law enforcement. We delegate, governments in Canada delegate the enforcement of the law, against blockades to police forces and other law enforcement agencies. And so that's a question you'll have to put to them. Governments don't direct.
Do you think that's systemic racism?
Look, I think these blockades are illegal. They should be taken down, but that's a decision for law enforcement to make. Thank you.
Thank you. How do you feel when you see these protesters out here?
Well, I think it's important to recognize this is not a protest. This is an occupation, and it's time for them to leave.
I've seen a lot of Mohawk flags, Métis flags. When you see those, I don't know if you have, but what does that tell you?
Look, I think elders of the Algonquin territory, certainly Elder Commanda, was very clear about their requests for the occupiers of Algonquin territory, and I think if we're going to respect other Indigenous territory that's not our own, as visitors, as Indigenous people and other people's Indigenous territory, we need to respect those requests.
Thank you so much.